I'd like to thank our sponsors today, Yadi, Kulka, FIA Capital Partners, San Ward Cashignano, and U.S. Pavement Services. Thank you. And before I introduce our moderator, we wanted to thank our sponsors one more time, Yadi, the Kulka Group, FIA Capital Partners, San Ward Cashignano, and U.S. Pavement, who sponsors all of our events annually. Without them, a lot of these webinars don't happen. So again, thank you all for that opportunity. This is me, I'm Rick Kaplan. I'm with the New England Real Estate and the New York Real Estate Journal. Anyone that is interested in doing anything with any of our webinars or our one-on-one interviews, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to discuss it with you. And now I would like to introduce our moderator. Our moderator is David Goldwasser. He's the principal and the founder of FIA Capital Partners, a diverse real estate company that specializes in complex, distressed, commercial and residential real estate properties involving bankruptcy and litigation issues. With over 20 years of litigation and crisis management experience, Goldwasser is busy these days, post-COVID, responding to troubled loans and restructuring services for debtors and guiding clients through restructuring, capital sourcing, and resolution of distressed debt. Both in and out of court, he buys into litigation positions, bankruptcies, claims, tax liens, and provides rescue capital for distressed properties in New York City, the West Coast, South Florida, where FIA CP has offices. I give you David Goldwasser.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to be with such an esteemed panel of great people. Do we want each of them to say something about their companies first for people who just joined, or the networking counts for that?
No, everyone should introduce by name, and they can do their short little bio on who they are and their company.
Great, Paul. Could you start us off?
Sure, Paul Fiorilla. I'm with Yardi Matrix, which is the data arm of Yardi Systems, the property management software firm. And Matrix provides, collects, and disseminates data on multifamily office and self-storage properties around the country. And we produce a wide range of publications, which I oversee, national and metro outlooks, and white papers and monthly rent surveys for those sectors. I'm also the editor-in-chief of the CRE Finance World, which is published by the CRE Finance Council. It's a trade group that represents the capital markets and debt market based in Washington.
Great. Rob, take a word from Kulka.
Rob Menino, I'm with the Kulka Group. We are a construction manager. We've been in business for about 46 years. Primarily, we do everything from office fit outs to large scale industrial, like we were just having a conversation with, and everything in between. We've done hospitality, we've done stuff for education, healthcare, so you name it. We're lucky enough to have a history doing it. So yeah, we're located on Long Island, Central Long Island, but we work in the boroughs. We work in Manhattan. We've done some stuff even down in Florida, Chicago. So we've definitely been around for a while, and I'm lucky enough to have, like Joe was saying, a team of experts around me who really know the business well. Would really make my job easier going out and selling the brand. So.
Great. Matt, you want to give us a little bit about yourself since you've been silent?
Sure. Matt Geary, I'm a commercial real estate broker in New York City with Bestian Global Workplace Services. Bestian is a full service, tenant rep only commercial real estate firm with global offices. I primarily work in New York City working with office tenants and retail tenants, overseeing, advising, and helping them with their real estate requirements.
Great. And Joe, follow up and finishing off the introductions.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Rick, special thanks for reaching out and getting me on the show today. I'm CEO and founder of Metropolitan Realty Associates. We're celebrating our 20th year in business and very excited about that. We focus on ground up repositioning, leasing, and marketing strategies to invest in office, retail, and industrial properties in the New York metropolitan area, typically in conjunction or joint venture with institutional partners as our equity or high net worths.
Great. Okay, so as Rick had mentioned before, we hear every day doom and gloom across the universe. So I'm going to make a very simple introduction question for everybody. I'll start with Matt. Give me some good news that you see in the market today. Something good that everybody can at least, start off with understanding something good that's happening in your part of the world with your leasing and your tenant rep work.
The good news is I'm finally starting to see rents coming down.
Good for you, bad for the owners.
Yeah. Historically, going back to 08, 09, 10, it took well over a year for rents to bottom out in New York City in the recession. And that was a 35% drop roughly. So we're just finally starting to see some significant drops in rents. Just from Q1 to Q2, it was really only like about 25 cents. And just in the last couple of weeks, starting to see some better opportunities. And that's really what a lot of tenants have been waiting for. And that's a lot of people have been on the sidelines. And so that's definitely an opportunity for me to reach out to my clients and future clients to start getting business going again in Manhattan.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up to that. You said it's a compressed amount of time that the rents have dropped. What was the time from when they dropped in the last cycle to where they got, what was the period of time it took to get up? First, how long did it take to get down? You said now it took then about a year or 2 years or something?
A little over a year to bottom out. Yeah.
And then how long and then when did it start rising again from that point?
It was pretty quickly after that. I mean, that you got to kind of catch it on the way down if you're advising a tenant on when to get the best deal, sort of before you hit the bottom. So
you're saying going into Q4 now might be the time to start shopping for people who actually want to get some office space.
No, it's a chance to start looking at opportunities, but I don't think we're near the bottom yet. No.
Okay. Yeah. Paul, you have anything that you're seeing on that from the data side to back up what Matt?
I mean, I have some slides if you but if you want me to show any of them, I can do that, or I could just talk, whatever you think.
Let's talk for a little bit. We'll get some slides if we need.
I mean, I think the good news is for New York is that the professional businesses, the finance, job loss has kept to a minimum. New York overall unemployment rate is high, but they've had an extraordinarily loss in the leisure and hospitality sector. I think in New York's leisure and hospitality has lost about 45% of its jobs compared to about 25% for the nation, and finance jobs are down about 2%. So it's the core sectors have not done as badly as you might have thought when you look at the job picture across the country, and so that's good. I mean, there's problems there too, but the other thing I think about the city and kind of a longer term thing is that, I mean, New York is still unique. We're starting to see, people moving out, occupancy in multifamily is going down, and it's been hit harder than most other cities. But, New York has, the things, I mean, there's people the reason that people were attracted to New York, they still exist. They're not there right now, so people aren't, people are moving out. Some people are moving out anyway. But I think if the situation with the vaccines is resolved and people feel safe again, I think the city will snap back fairly quickly. Although, again, I mean, that remains to be seen as well.
Okay, great.
Park provides things that is unique, and there's a reason why it's prospered, and that will be the case once things come back to normal.
Right, and now you mentioned that we have a large loss in the hospitality and food industry. The question, I guess, becomes how long does that take to go up again? Because unlike office, which can be occupied, starting up a restaurant, you're not going to have, for argument's sake, 10,000 restaurants start up tomorrow, whereas offices can be, you can have 5,000 people go back to work tomorrow in an office. So do you have have you looked at any of those trends and what that will look like on the rebound?
Well, to me, the longer that this goes on, the more difficult it will be for the city to rebound. When this first started, we thought it was going to be a couple months, and really the problem is people don't feel safe. The offices aren't I think the offices is 10-15% occupied. Companies haven't canceled their leases yet because they're expecting that they will come back sometime within the next few weeks or even next year. But the longer that it gets, the safety issue gets resolved, I think the more difficult it will be for the city. And I think the biggest issue right now is people feeling safe. So, as far as the longer that the city is shut down, the harder it will be to reopen those kind of businesses that are, are not very well capitalized. They're not the JP Morgans of the world.
Listen, let's get right to it, because I think safety gets to the heart of policing and making sure that people feel comfortable getting back into the city, because none of these businesses can thrive without residents and employees working in New York City. So until the police department is backed by the mayor and really working to enforce law and order, I can't see people really getting excited about it. But it is incumbent upon the real estate industry to get back to New York City and bring back, to people what we sell. We sell real estate. We sell opportunity within the industry. We have jobs that we want to maintain. We want to show people, they should be leasing space, as Matt said in his business, that people have to come back to the city. And until the city can be recognized as a comfortable place to live and work again, it's going to be very difficult. And just as Paul mentioned, the longer that goes on, the more difficult it is. But I think that the city is the greatest place, in America. And we need to support it as an industry. We need to be back together as an industry. We need to be in New York. And until we're all there and we're leading the charge, because we're the leaders of that, it's going to be a tough road back. But there's definitely opportunity for everybody in the city. And
Joe, like you were saying the other day, we had a quick conversation earlier in the week. It can't last forever. Sooner or later, people have to get back to work. Business cannot continue the way that it is. People can't do business without being face-to-face. The virtual working can only create so much productivity. Eventually, people need to get to work. People need to get in the office. People need to be in the environment, need to be in the atmosphere. And I think that sooner or later, yes, we have to govern it better and it has to get safer, but people are also going to lower the bar a little bit because they just have to get back to work and they have to get back.
Sure. I think every business owner, listen, I can't say every business owner. I think business owners and chief executive officers across the board look at their business and say, what's transpired over the last 6 months is going to be difficult to continue over the next 6 months if we want to keep productivity up, if we want to keep employee morale up, if we want to be productive, if we want to pitch new business, if we want to create new relationships. It's great that Rick put together 400 people on Zoom to interact, but it's very difficult to interact and meet new people, even with the chat bar and the addresses and the emails. You know, it takes a matter of face-to-face communication to build trust, build relationships, and build new opportunities to grow businesses. And sitting at home with the dog barking and the kids screaming, very difficult and challenging way to make a company's business more productive. So I'm a big advocate of putting on your mask, staying safe, social distancing, but getting back in the office. And New York City office landlords are very smart people, very sophisticated. They understand how to take care of their properties, how to make sure that their tenants' guests, and their employees are all safe. And we all have to step up and get back to the office and get our economy back on track. It's too important not to.
Rob, let me ask you, in your business of construction management, have you been asked to either reinvent or redesign or help adjust buildings for the now known as, safety that we're looking for, as Joe is talking about? Are your clients asking you to retrofit or do anything to their buildings?
Of course, it's always a conversation, and a lot of times it happens in the common areas, bathrooms, lobbies, elevators, things of that nature. Sometimes it's as simple as adding sanitation stations. Sometimes it's a slightly different layout. I think furniture comes into a big play of that. You know what I mean? So I think that a lot of the furniture companies have stepped up and done that. So yeah, everyone's concerned, but I agree with Joe in the sense that people are being smart about it. Everything that we see and everything that we've experienced is, people are taking the proper precautions. People are taking the proper steps to make sure people are healthy, temperature checks, check-ins, making sure that everyone's responsible. And I think that's across the board, just as a society. I think that everyone has kind of been taking it seriously. I know that if people aren't feeling good in the household, people have called me and we've rescheduled. But so I think that the landlords are taking the proper steps. They are making sure that the common areas are safe. And I also think that the tenants and the visitors and everyone is taking it seriously and has a social responsibility to do so. So I think that they're definitely making it a safer place. And I know that I've been visiting a lot of places I felt safe.
Now, Matt, I want to direct this to you. Off of that, I want your opinion on what Rob was saying, or just additional. But I have another question to follow that up. But I just want to hear your feeling from your tenants. Are they looking for these type? What are the demands that they're making? I guess from a safe space.
Well, I was gonna add to that safety is really twofold. Do I feel safe walking to and from work after dark? That's one part of it. And then there's the latter, which is, do I feel safe working in my office, breathing the air that I'm breathing with all these other people?
Correct.
And that's been the huge hurdle to get over. There's a lot of different, HVAC systems that are adding components that are cleaning the air, but there's the legality issue about companies telling people that they need to come back when they not necessarily feel comfortable coming back. And I think you'd see a lot more people coming back to the office, but I think companies have been sort of sensitive about demanding that they come back. And you've seen some states putting forth bills where it gives companies immunity on things like this, but New York State is not one of them. So I think companies are trying to be sensitive, and no big company wants to be remembered as the company that made everybody go back too early and got people sick. So they're very sensitive to that.
Yeah, Joe, I'm going to bring this up to you, and I guess anybody else. I know that we just passed 9/11, and it's a very somber day in our country's history. But then again, it was a day where after that we had rebuilt. But if you remember, the same thing that Matt is talking about now, there was a very long pause in going back to the offices downtown. And, there was a lot of scare or feeling that there was, pollutants in the air from the dust and the different things that were down there. And as we had spoken about when we did our pre-panel, there was a big resilience and rebounding after that. What do you think? What are your comparisons or your thoughts compared to that time as what we're going through now?
I think there was actual mass destruction, back in the day of 9/11, which actually made it impossible for so many people to go back to their offices. And there was also a health scare, through the destruction of the buildings, the asbestos in the air, the contaminants in the air. I think it made tremendous sense that employees and employers were very smart and, kept people away from downtown. I think that downtown recovered rather quickly after the cleanup, as we had been discussing. And I think that in a manner where, because it was an environmental issue, the government and the special services were able to demonstrate to people that it was now safe to come back, and the buildings were cleaned, and downtown opened up, and yes, absolutely thrived quickly. I think what we're dealing now is with, what's been dubbed the invisible enemy, where we can't see and destroy so quickly without a vaccine. And I think the world is waiting for a vaccine to make things perfect to come back. But I think that we have to act in a similar vigilance and take the precautions that Rob was mentioning about indoor air and cleanliness and common areas. And once we feel comfortable that those precautions have been taken and people wear masks and people social distance, I think it's very much already been proven that those precautions save lives. I think that it's been proven that it reduces the spread of the virus. And I think that people can feel comfortable I'm not going to make anybody's decision, but my own decision is that this time I understand how to deal with the virus. And it's a combination of taking precaution and working within the environment that we're in. We can't just shelter in place and not come back to the office. I think that the government's shown us how to do it, the combination of wearing masks as well as social distancing. It's been completely proven that it reduces the spread of the virus. And if we want the economy to thrive, we have to abide by those rules, but we have to get out of our basement, so to speak, and get back to work. So wear your mask, social distance, and go to the office. And let's get back to work. I think that's incumbent upon, as I mentioned earlier, the real estate industry for one, because we're leaders in the buildings business, right? And our business, more than any business that I know, revolves around social activity, revolves around face-to-face negotiations, revolves around networking. It's a very, it's a very hand-to-hand, face-to-face business. So we need to go back in another 6 months of the same type of I guess, behavior that we've experienced. If we do it the same way, we'll keep the virus low, but we'll be able to go back and enjoy the benefits of what New York City offers, which is, supporting the restaurants, the bars. Hopefully the theater opens up again. Hopefully we have live venues soon. But if we're not, showing the world and, more importantly, our politicians that we can handle ourselves like adults, I think it's going to be a very, very, very slow grind, and something that isn't going to benefit anybody. So that's my thought.
Got it. Paul, let me ask you, now that for the most part, we're seeing that the PPP money, people have gone through their allotments, the larger companies and I guess some of the smaller companies, do you see trends that are coming up from your data that are showing that they're either more non-paying people or more non-paying office tenants, or what are the effects of that money running out with no new package at the moment available?
You know, the office data, and this is true nationally, not just in New York, the office data hasn't changed a lot in the last 6 months. You know, asking rents haven't changed a whole lot. The number of non-payments of rent in the office sector are relatively small. You know, office rents are, I don't know, the last I heard something about 95%, you know, on average for like, say, CMBS loans. You know, and the big problem is, you know, retail and hotels. So if you look at the data on delinquencies, you know, $12 billion of hotel loans went into special servicing over the last 6 months. And, you know, the about 25% are delinquent, and, you know, the retail delinquency rate is something like, you know, 18% or something like that. So, you know, those sectors clearly have problems. You know, hotels aren't operating anywhere near full capacity. Retail, depending on the center, you know, the total retail collections are, you know, barely over half, I think. And multifamily is starting to, you know, multifamily held up really well. On the larger institutional type properties, it's been roughly 2% worse than normal. And I think the smaller properties, collections are maybe 7 to 10% behind normal. But, you know, we had, you know, the unemployment, and I think, you know, especially in multifamily, the increased unemployment aid, that $600 that we had for 4 months, was a big factor in stability in that sector. So now that ran out, and, you know, it's new aid is stuck in the Senate. So, you know, it looks like it's not coming back anytime soon. So multifamily non-payments are starting to grow this month. I think for the, you know, the institutional properties, it was, you know, about 4%. So still not horrible, but the problem's getting worse, and it'll continue to get worse. And, you know, the main reason is that, you know, when you look at the unemployment numbers, the unemployment is mostly affecting, you know, salary workers in lower paid industries. So they're having a tougher time with the rent payments. And if, you know, if we don't extend aid to them, or create some kind of a, you know, the industry, the real estate industry is lobbying to have, you know, renter assistance programs to pay, you know, to help pay rent. So right now we have, you know, the CDC announced its eviction ban, but that doesn't solve the problem of, you know, rental non-payment. So what we really need is, you know, some kind of a temporary fund that will help pay the rents of people who can't pay, and continue, you know, increased unemployment aid. I think that probably is a lot more effective than, you know, things like the PPP, which, you know, it had some of, you know, you know, the you know, the standards for that were kind of strange, and I don't know. I mean, I think that helps to some degree, but I think the, you know, kind of the aid to individuals, that's a bigger influence or a bigger impact in boosting payments, you know, rental payments in the multifamily industry.
All right,
So David,
Yeah.
going back to your first question, we didn't really get around the horn on it, but where are there bright spots? What's good news? You know, I think that there's a lot of bad stuff we could talk about. Unfortunately, that's kind of how this started, but there are bright spots in the real estate industry, and the industrial sector is definitely one area where I would say, if you could use the word post-COVID, you know, has actually seen increased demand, increased investment sales pricing, and increased or similar transactional activity, where the shift in online shopping, e-commerce, and logistics has really bolstered that sector of the economy. And you're seeing across the New York metropolitan area a push by all sorts of logistics companies to get into the market, lease space, move rental rates up. And, in fact, my company is very active in the industrial space. And, pre-COVID pricing was at one level. Post-COVID or during COVID, we've actually seen deals that we bid on prior to the pandemic and now post-pandemic, pricing increasing from bids that we made, back in January and February to where landlords and brokers see the market today, and they're getting the pricing, which is tremendous. So what we've really been focusing on, and where some bad news reaps opportunity, the retail market, as everybody's noted, has definitely been hit hardest outside of the hotel and travel sector. And we've seen a sector of the market where transactions are taking place and where we're seeking opportunities to buy retail at a discount, and in the right opportunities, either rezone or rebuild as of right into industrial assets where we're buying retail at a discount. We're not buying industrial owners' cash flow, and we're creating value by leasing up these assets that we've renovated. So there are bright spots in the market. It may not be immediately in front of you in terms of trying to buy a multifamily building or a New York City, high-rise steel and glass building, but there are opportunities that are out there for investors, for brokers, for equity providers, for lenders, for that matter. So
Joe, what you're saying, and just to encapsulate, is that this is really more of a marathon play where you're going in now for a longer term view. I know you have an expertise in adaptive reuse in your company. So, from what you're saying, it's basically the good news is there's a demise somewhere, but there's a bright spot out of the demise. Now, it might not be good for the person you're buying from or their lender, but for what you're saying is that we take the bad and we make it into something good. So
right.
You're right. It's a recreation effect. It's not a matter of looking at the bad. It's how do we make the bad into good.
Sure, of course. I mean, that's the nature of the business. Even before there was a pandemic, there were always opportunities in the real estate sector to convert buildings from one use to another. Today, I'm talking about retail to industrial. Another day, I may have been speaking about industrial to retail. Right. I remember a great project that NYREJ did in the Bronx. We took an old bakery, the Stella D'Oro Cookie Factory, which was a massive warehouse and bakery, and we created, a tremendous 200,000 square foot outdoor, mall in the middle of Riverdale on the Major Deegan. Nobody was thinking that, industrial was going to come back as strong as it did. Who knows, if we didn't do that project as retail, Amazon might be leasing that today as a last mile delivery
Sure.
facility for them. I mean, it's unparalleled location, and the logistics are incredible. And, the density is enormous. It's very hard to find those kinds of locations. So I think it's a natural progression of real estate. And the pandemic has really, in my opinion, probably moved a lot of businesses, a lot of sectors of real estate into this uncomfortable position quicker than not. The retail sector was in trouble pre-pandemic. I think the pandemic has really just accelerated or exacerbated
with the last mile distribution, right? That was coming no matter what. Like these e-commerce companies, they were coming and they were going to continue to grow and continue to grow. And now it made a violent shove into something that is just much faster. I know for me, light industrial is almost impossible to come by. These people that want this last mile distribution and small warehouses with high ceilings and drive-in, like it's very hard to come by. And I see the same opportunities. And I think that with any market, you have to find the opportunistic approach. I mean, that's not specific to now. That's specific to always.
Correct. But what's going on now, I think you alluded to it to a degree, or you made a comment that alludes to it. There are decisions being made for people now that they weren't sure of before. some of the large retailers who are going bankrupt were not in a good business position prior to the pandemic. It just forced the issue. I think, there were a lot of, and, I'm sure Matt will agree that there are a lot of companies who are looking at resizing or fracturing their enterprise locations in order to better fit, we'll call it the new way that people want to work, where maybe closer to home. So it's not that they don't want to work in an office. And I think, Joe, you've been speaking to that all along. People want to be in an office. You might want to go home and work at a home 1 day a week or 2 days, here and there. But there's no way, not no way. People who have families or they live with other people cannot effectively work out of their houses all the time. There's just the team collaboration, people working together. There's a human connection that cannot be replaced by this new artificial reality or artificial intelligence or whatever the words would be. And human interaction is something that drives people from now until the end of time. As much as the new generation wants to say it doesn't. I mean, I can tell you right now that in the past 2 months, I think we have picked up 8 clients with an aggregate of probably about $1 billion of real estate who now need to restructure or reposition their debt. Some of them are mid-construction, some of them are hotels, some of them are retail, obviously non-industrial by nature. And each of them has a way to look at it. Either we're in trouble or there's an opportunity to work towards something new. And some of the issues are that there is too high of a debt on what is currently being, where things are. And I'm sure, Joe, you can speak to a development site, as you were saying, who was a hotel development versus something that could be an industrial development, 2 different pricing models. And I see, Paul, you're raising your hand.
No, we did a study. We wrote a white paper about 4 or 6 weeks ago, where we looked at the properties, our office and multifamily properties, and we looked at those with low vacancy rates and when the mortgages were maturing. And we identified, because there's a lot of money out there that's being raised to, for opportunistic acquisitions. And what we found was there's kind of 2 areas where properties have potential distress. And it was a lot more in office. There's not a lot of multifamily properties with high vacancy rates. So there's more in the office sector than in multifamily. But that said, the 2 areas are properties that were having trouble before COVID. If a property was struggling with weak income and weak demand before COVID, it's not going to get any better. So no matter when their loans are due, there's probably going to be some distress in that area. And the other area where we see potential distress coming up is in properties that are in lease up, because there's like 700,000. At the beginning of this year there were like 700,000 multifamily properties under construction that are going to come online in the next 2 years. There's a lot of office space, including 24 million in New York City. So properties that are in the lease up phase and suddenly getting hit with kind of a weak demand scenario. That's the other area where there could potentially be some distress over the next year or 2. And, it's probably not going to happen in the next 6 months, but, again, 18 to 24 months.
Sure. Now, Rob, you had mentioned that your group recently started to put some capital together to look for opportunities. Are you looking at, in your mind, because Paul brought up capital being aggregated in order to take advantage of stuff. There are a lot of vulture funds out there who are trying to buy debt. It's yet to be seen what the courts feel about everybody, the way that they're pursuing them. I mean, there's a lot of these UCC sales on mezzanine debt in order to try to take the properties and not work with the borrowers, where we don't see that in general from the banks. But, the opportunities that you're looking for, are they more from a lender side, or are you looking for a joint venture side? What are you guys looking to do?
So we look for much more opportunistic stuff, value add stuff. We dabble in it. We're not nearly as as robust in it as like a guy like Joe is, but we'll look for things where we have an end user, like an industrial space, for instance, where we could find an end user for it, maybe repurpose something. We'll add some value through the construction, but we'll also put together a group of investors that'll invest in something like that. So we're seeing a big opportunity, like Joe said, in industrial. There's the housing market on Long Island is booming, so we look for stuff multifamily, usually transit oriented, things that we can get involved on both the quote unquote development side or investor side, but really add the value on the construction side as well.
I speak to a lot of these funds and investors as well as the borrowers in my business, because I get calls about everybody saying, "Oh, what can I buy into? You're in all the middle of all this distress. What can I invest in?" So one of the funds that I was talking to, I said, "I'm going to be moderating this webinar," and I said, "What are your thoughts? And what should I discuss?" And what he said was that he's been in this business for a long time. He's been around all the changes, and the resiliency of New York has had many different lives. But what we're seeing, I think, as we read the papers, and Matt, I'm going to direct this to you in a second, but tech seems to be the new, besides industrial, being in the outliers. In the middle of Manhattan or in the middle of Brooklyn, you're not getting industrial because it's just not worth the prices. But because tech firms like Amazon Music recently signed a lease for a decent amount of space to put in studios in Williamsburg. We know Netflix is looking, in Brooklyn. But it seems that New York is going to be not as much as the stodgier old style law firms and financial firms, which are going to stay. But I think tech is starting to make its entrance, which then goes into the next phase of resurgence of people wanting to live in the city or close to the city because they want to be part of this cool vibe of what's coming. So Matt, do you see more tech firms looking at New York City, and is it in Manhattan? Is it in Brooklyn, or what do you see?
It hasn't started. It started in 2009 when Google bought 111 8th Avenue, and they have been the market driver ever since. Typically, Midtown and financial services is the market driver. It's been led by tech. So you're seeing all the, Google, Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn. They've really been the market drivers. And I think they've sort of propped up Midtown asking rents, which are, again, usually the market driver. There was one time a couple of months ago where they actually, Midtown South, which is the market, call it 34th Street down to Canal, river to river, where all the tech firms really want to be, surpassed Midtown's average asking rent. So it's for sure that they're here to stay. I mean, you hear Facebook saying, "Don't come back to work until July of 2021." But
Google is saying Google is saying the exact same thing.
But at the same time, Facebook just leased the entire Farley Post Office for 730,000 square feet. So yes, I think they're definitely here to stay, and they're the market driver. And you're starting to see people actually, like you said, push into Brooklyn, where new construction is a little bit more affordable. You're looking at rents that start like in the mid 60s per square foot versus new construction in Midtown would be closer to probably 100 to 130 bucks a foot. So there's a lot of value out in Brooklyn for the time being.
Right. Joe, what's your take on that?
Well, listen, I agree 100% with Matt. I mean, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters have all come into the city and and absorbed enormous amounts of space, and as Matt mentioned, raised asking rents, across the board. I just come from it just a little bit different. I think as such important players within the New York City dynamic, I think they should be coming back to the office. I think they should be using, that office space to bring their employees back. And I recognize, the issues of liability and companies, especially large companies, being cautious, but they're a big part of the city, and the city needs them now. And I think that I think they have to return. So,
Joe, I
That's
agree
really
with
where I
you.
come in. Yeah.
I agree with you. It's just contrary to what people are hearing about when they're going back to work. You know, they're still leasing space, and I think
No,
what
no,
you're
it's great.
saying,
I think it's terrific. Long term.
what they do need to come back to
Yeah.
the office for the
Yeah.
vitality of the entire city,
Right.
retail, restaurants, and
Right.
such.
Restaurants will not make it until July 2021 when they decide to come back. It's just a fact. Restaurants won't make it past September 30th at 25% occupancy in 30-degree weather. I mean, it's just not. It's not reasonable. It's not businesslike. It makes absolutely no sense for a mayor who, wants to run the greatest city in the world, not to let the city run and to hold back, the economic engine where there are safe ways to do things. Why 25%? Why not 50%? Okay. Why at 12 a.m. in the morning does a restaurant or a bar have to shut down? Does the virus get more lethal at 12:30 a.m.? What changes where somebody's working capacity has to be shut down because of the virus? There's so many different questions. Why are riots permitted with no defense and schools can't open safely? It makes no sense. So I think people have to come out, and react to the reality that they're dealing with. If people don't want economic hardship, well, they have to get back to work, and they have to, businesses have to recognize what's going on. That's again just my piece, but nobody can wait till July 2021 when the water's nice and warm and it's clear and bright and there's lots of chlorine in it and it's safe to swim. Everybody's got to put on their big boy and girl pants and go to work. We work every day. That's how we try to make a living. We're out working for our investors and our just everybody trying to support the business. If my company wasn't at work during the pandemic, we would have disappointed our investors. We wouldn't have delivered projects on time. We wouldn't have been able to open businesses that needed to be open themselves. And we did our part. We stepped up. We took risks. But that business is about taking risks. So I think everybody has to take a little bit of risk in this environment and not play it as safe as people want. And again, I go back to the science is wear a mask and be socially distanced and go to work and, help your families and New York City get back on their feet.
And these same things, these same regulations that make no sense, the stop at 12 a.m. instead of 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. Like we always have, again, the virus is not more deadly at an earlier time than night. Those same things are leading to scare tactics. Those same things are just slowing everybody to come back to the office, slowing everything down, and things like the trends of virtual restaurants or virtual kitchens that people are taking advantage of delivery services. Bottom line is there's no one to deliver to. So guys can't even adapt and take care of other opportunistic ideas if people aren't coming to the city. So it's just, we got to start the politics behind it has to start being more logical. So people aren't as scared to actually live their lives.
Right. We're in the greatest city in the world. We have to make it productive again. I just got a note. The CDC called my office. They want me to stop talking. So
we started that segment talking about tech companies, and I just wanted to say, it's just not the big tech companies that are in New York. There's a significant number of startup tech companies. My oldest son is a programmer, and he's worked for a bunch of them, and there's a huge amount of demand for small, startups and small, like the, companies that have been in existence for just a couple of years for tech talent. It's a very thriving industry, or, it's been a very thriving industry over the last few years in New York.
Right. And then, one of the, I think Joe and everybody alluded at different levels, but Joe's been the most vocal. It's true. Growing up in New York City as I did, and, everybody here has a New York mentality. We went out for dinner or drinks if you work in Manhattan, you went out for drinks or dinner every night, networking, meeting with people, meeting with your clients, and you didn't go home until 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever time it was, because you were always entertaining, right? That stopped for the most part. Now, I know there's some resurgence at some level, but for the most part, it stopped. And, Rob, you mentioned in the beginning, you started this content site in order to drive some networking, towards your way. But I think at the end of the day, you also said that after you met Joe virtually the other day, you guys are setting up a lunch, right? Or some type of an in-person meeting. Is our, as we're sitting here on a Zoom doing this, right? Is our, I guess, changed reality, I wouldn't say new reality, but the changing of the reality going to be more online driven to then get to personal social interaction? Or is it harder? Are you getting more leads that are not going anywhere? Meaning, it's a lot easier to go sit down with somebody and really feel across the table if you can work with that person, right? Or if that person has a good vibe to you. You don't have that same feeling on a Zoom. I know that, I live in Florida, but I've been grew up and been working in New York my whole life, and I was commuting for the past 15 years. I know that, in the past few weeks, when some of the larger cases that needed my attention, I fly in for an in-person meeting because people don't want to entrust somebody with $100 million issue because they meet me on Zoom. Yes, I do get a net, they are recommended by somebody in my business, but, what do you see, from where do you see this going? Your content, is that bringing people to you? Are you meeting with them, or is this going to, we're all on the phone? How is that?
I see it as both. I do see the same way that COVID had made things move faster on an e-commerce side or a retail side. I think that the virtualization of socializing has been definitely pushed in that direction. I mean, I remember these first Zoom calls, you get on with 60 people and half the people didn't even know how to use it, right? Like they didn't know what button to press or what to do with it.
The face was all the way up.
Yeah, and now it's just become, a norm. So I do think that has increased it. I don't think, like you said, on a large scale for a large business transaction, I'm not giving anyone $100 million without ever meeting the guy. I think that takes a lot of face-to-face. I think that takes a lot of in-person interaction. And, for me, I have this studio that we built, and we're inviting people here, and we're being safe about it. We're being responsible about it. But a lot of the reason why I built this studio is not only for people to see us online, is to invite people here that I might want to do business with and have a personal interaction with them, a personal conversation, and say, hey, Mr. Developer or Mr. Architect, that, we've seen each other, we know each other exists, but we don't have that personal touch. I bring them into the studio and I have that conversation. I still think it's massively, massively important, and no Zoom call is ever going to take the place of that. But the reality is that, social networks and Zoom and this, it has increased it tremendously. It has sped up the process to make this more normal, whether we agree with it or not, it definitely has become more normal, and people are going to do business virtually way more than they did, 7, 8, 9 months ago.
Matt, how's that impacted your ability to canvas, get new clients? Is it speeding it up as Rob is talking about? Is it making it harder?
It's made it, it's definitely different. We have been, having mostly all of our meetings virtually. We have been getting hired for assignments over Zoom. But I still think the bar is in person. I used to get new business meetings, or some of my people would get new business meetings. And if they would not take an in-person meeting, if they would just take a phone call, that really sort of was a litmus test for how serious they were about, hiring us and moving forward with the process. So,
if you don't get invited to Kalka's studios, he doesn't really want to do anything with you, just so you know.
So it's, it's working for the time being, but that will be my bar going forward when I go back to the office full time. I expect to meet with people. And you know, we'll see. But I obviously it has sped things up, as Rob alluded to. But you know, maybe that's for some meetings, but I don't think for, you know, serious meetings where you're looking to get hired or you're looking for somebody's money, that's going to be something that's done over Zoom in the future.
I could tell you right now that if Joe's building a building, right, and he's hiring a construction manager, and he calls me up and says, I'd like for you to come out, I'd like to talk about the construction of this ground up project that I'm working on, and he calls 3 project managers or construction managers out to have a conversation, 2 of them come, and I decide, you know what, I'm not ready, I'm not available, I can't come to your office, let's do it over Zoom, I'm just not comfortable. It's going to have an impact on the way that I'm viewed, and it's going to have an impact on the way that he chooses who he's going to go with moving forward. So I think that it does limit the amount of business you could do if you're not getting out and doing those face-to-face meetings.
Right. Listen, it takes 2 people or 2 parties to want to meet, right? So nobody can force anybody to do anything. But again, I just go back to what the science says. The science says that masks and social distancing is acceptable and safe, and you always want to be safe no matter what you do. I just think people, you know, it's time for people to recognize, wear your mask, socially distance, and continue doing business. And I'd be very comfortable to meet with Rob or any of you folks with my mask and being socially distanced at a table or in a parking lot or in a restaurant, wherever it might be, and we can get back to business and, you know, and all be successful. That's all it's really about. And the economy and the real estate market, which I know I care a tremendous amount about, you know, is first and foremost in my mind, and can recover across the board. And I just think it's a mentality and a philosophy. And yes, I spoke a lot about it, David, I'm sorry, but that's what's happening in New York City right now. I mean, this is what it's about. It's about getting the city back to business and getting businesses, you know, back on track to be successful, and helping the restaurants and the entertainment venues and the theaters and the cruise lines and the airlines, and, you know, everybody come back. And it's a social responsibility to be safe. It's a social responsibility to socially distance and wear your mask. And if everybody does it, we should be able to, you know, to do business, and our city can be as great as it ever was, without a doubt. And we can all move on to greater things than worrying about talking about this.
To add to that, I think that's the impetus for getting people back into the office. If I'm 25 and I know that some of my colleagues who are similar in age are back in the office and they're interacting with my boss, you know, I'm going to have to start rethinking, like, maybe I should be there too. Am I missing out on opportunities?
Absolutely.
It happened in
New York City. That's the New York City grind. You got to get ahead of the other guys. So I think,
so put your mask on and go back to the office. That's it. That's what we have to do. We all have to work together. It's a communal obligation, and everybody has to listen to what the science says, and, you know, not be, as the governor says of New Jersey, knuckleheads, and just, you know, do the right thing, and it can really work out well for everybody. And those are the days I'm looking forward to.
Governor Murphy was, I just met him 9/11. There was a 9/11 ceremony he attended in my town.
He didn't call you a knucklehead, did he? He didn't call you a knucklehead.
He only spoke for about 2 minutes. It was, you know,
didn't have enough time.
He didn't say anything about it. I just got an email from somebody who asked me about the slides. I mentioned that I had slides. I know we don't really have time to show them, but either, you know, they're about multifamily and office data, and a little bit of demographic data on New York. So if anybody is interested, you know, I'm happy. Just send me an email or whatever. I'm happy to send them to anybody.
Well, I was just going to mention, so Paul, if you want, is it possible to go through those slides fairly quickly?
Yeah, I mean, we've got 2 minutes, but I can show you what they are. I mean, let's see, where's my,
and then someone can always follow up with you.
Yeah. So just real quickly. So, you know, we have apartment listings, you know, there's been a lot of online, whoops, let me see. There's been a lot of online looking for apartments as opposed to in person. So here, multifamily nationally, you can see rent growth has turned negative, mostly due to the lifestyle, the upper end properties. In New York, that's the same trend where you have, the lifestyle is the luxury, the higher end apartments. So you can see rent growth is turned fairly steeply negative in that. And the B and C apartments, the renter by necessity, it's been kind of flat. So our forecasts for the year, we have New York down about 2%, and the suburbs only down a little bit. Our supply forecasts have dropped. I mentioned that there's not a lot of new starts because of construction financing being off and the delays in the deliveries. Multifamily supply, you can see there's a significant number of new units in Brooklyn and Queens and Long Island. As a percentage of stock, they're among the highest in the country. Office fundamentals, I mentioned, new Brooklyn and Manhattan, the office fundamentals have been fairly strong, and there hasn't been a big change over the last 6 months in terms of asking rents and vacancy rates as of yet. But, the supply, you can see Manhattan's got a significant amount of supply, and Brooklyn does too. Brooklyn has 2.8 million square feet, which is a lot because, that's a small market in terms of office, but it's starting to grow. From a demographics point of view, I think what's interesting about this is that, Manhattan and Brooklyn have if you look at all the metros, relatively speaking, Manhattan and Brooklyn have a lot of young people, and that's the vibrant, young, intelligent, college-educated workforce that we have. And Queens is a little bit of a slightly older demographic. But, from population growth, New York City is, domestic immigration is sort of negative, but we've had a growth that has been reliant in the last, decade or so, or even further on immigration, as we're dropping a point where immigrants settle. And so that's something that's also an issue in the next election, immigration policy, which, has been, weakened. So, things like immigration policy and aid to the cities and states, which are in the House bill, which are not in, the Senate is trying to resist. I mean, those are things that are going to be decided by the next election and have a big impact on jobs and real estate. So I'll end there, and if anyone wants a copy of this, let me know. I'm happy to send them along. Thank you.
It's excellent. It's excellent research, Paul. I went through it yesterday. Very impressive. Sorry we didn't have enough time to go through it, but you did a fantastic job, and Rick should make it available to all the participants. I think it'd be very helpful.
Definitely. I did the same thing, and anybody that has a few minutes should really look through it because it's very extensive, and I found it to be very interesting. So great job on it.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to get a hold of Paul, could you put your contact information in the chat box once again? I know you put it in already, but if you could put it in once again, and if you can't get a hold of Paul at Yachty, Paul Fiore,
There's a lot of Italians in Boston. You shouldn't be there.
How do you say your last name, Paul?
Fiorillo.
Fiorillo. Well, I'm terrible with last names. But if you could, if you want, someone wants to get in touch with Paul, you can find his name and contact information in the chat box. If you can't get a hold of Paul or you missed the chat box, contact me, Rick Kaplan, at the New York Real Estate Journal, and I can forward you the information as well. David, unfortunately, we could have gone on for another half an hour. But time is running out, and I want to thank you for moderating. I want to thank the rest of the panel. I know people at home are standing applauding that you guys all did a great job. And Joe, the CDC did call, and they,
Yes, that's what I thought.
I don't know if you're going to be around tomorrow.
Well, I'm definitely not putting my name in the chat box. That's
Again, I want to thank everyone for participating. I want to thank all the people that attended today. I also want to send a special thank you to all of our sponsors, Yadi, which is Paul Fiorillo, and he will be able to give you all the contact information that, or give you all the information that was on the slides. The Kulka Group, FIA Capital Partners, that's David and Goldwasser, and also Robert Menino is the Kulka Group. San Ward Cascignano, and our annual sponsor, who is US Pavement Services. I'd like to thank them all. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I also want to thank again the panel. Excellent job. Thank you all. Have a
Thank
pleasant
you.
afternoon.
See you.
Thank you for watching today's interview. If you'd like to be a guest, a sponsor, or even advertise in the New England Real Estate Journal, you'll find our contact information in the description box below. You can also find all our social media platforms so you can follow us, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.